date is 1st October 1502. A European pirate captures a passenger ship called Mary in the middle of the Arabian Sea. On board there are hundreds of pilgrims returning from Saudi Arabia to India's Malabar coast. The European pirate holds the ship hostage for 5 days. He seizes 12,000 gold coins. Then he orders his men to burn all 700 passengers alive. Half of them are women and children. The pirates' men set the wooden ship on fire. They ensure that it burns for 2 days. As the ship slowly goes up in flames, screams and cries for help are heard far away. Women passengers hold their babies up, asking the pirates to show mercy as the fire slowly approaches them. Some mothers panic and throw their babies into the sea, hoping they will survive. The cold-blooded pirate leader watches the massacre from a distance as 700 people slowly get roasted to death. The episode is later documented as the Pilgrim Ship Incident. The name of the European pirate behind this criminal act is Vasco da Gama. He is celebrated by the Western world and some Indian historians as an iconic Portuguese explorer. He was the first European criminal to invade Indian territory. His arrival opened the floodgates for Europe to colonize India for the next 500 years. Today, in the beautiful Indian state of Goa, an entire city is dedicated to this Portuguese mass murderer. The city is officially called Vasco da Gama. Nobody complains about it. Most people don't want the name changed. Located in western Goa, Vasco City lies near the Dabolim airport and juts out into the Arabian Sea. It is a wonder of modern India that a city officially exists in the name of a guy who launched India's invasion by the West. There is a lot of noise these days about changing Mughal era names of cities in India. But no one questions why an Indian city should continue to be called Vasco da Gama. To understand why it is humiliating for Indians to have a city in Vasco's name, you have to do two things. One, you have to look at the track record of the Portuguese pirate. And two, you have to look at the dark history of Goa, where the Portuguese treated Indians with extreme cruelty. Vasco da Gama was established as a city in 1543 during the time of the Portuguese Colonial Empire. At that time, Portuguese colonizers had a firm grip on the entire Malabar coastline. The city's main railway station was built in coordination with British colonizers in India. Vasco was so admired by the Europeans at that time that the train depot was named Vasco da Gama Railway Station, as you can see here. The railway station is located on Swatantra Path in Vasco City. Now, Swatantra Path means freedom road. Isn't that a cruel joke? Vasco da Gama railway station is owned by Indian Railways and operated by South Western Railway Division. For passenger trains, Vasco station is a terminus. From there, the railway track goes all the way to Guntakal town in Andhra Pradesh, crossing the Western Ghats. The line is called Murmugaon Railway. It is atrocious that the Indian government uses taxpayer money to run a railway station named after a racist guy who once killed thousands of Indians out of hatred. There is another landmark in Vasco City that stands out as a symbol of the Portuguese bandit. It's the Vasco Clock Tower, which lies on Swatantra Path, close to Vasco da Gama railway station. The clock tower, built in 1935, is located in the busy municipal market area. Nobody questions why the city's most prominent landmark is named after a colonizer. Instead, a local charitable trust has taken charge of restoring and maintaining the Vasco Clock Tower. Vasco City is dotted with many more landmarks named after him. There is Vasco Sports Club in the northern part of the city. The football club was created in 1951 by Portuguese soldiers who were posted in Goa. Then there are many malls, shops, houses and statues dedicated to him. About 500 years ago, Vasco da Gama set foot on Indian soil and unleashed unprecedented misery and murders. Then in 1961, India took back control of Goa from Portuguese colonizers. Now fast forward to 2024. Why do we still have an entire city named after the Portuguese pirate? Is it a colonial hangover? Let's turn the clock back to how India's nightmare relationship with the man started. On May 20th, 1498, Vasco da Gama and his fleet of 4 ships sailed from Portugal, circled around Africa from the south and arrived at Kappadu near modern-day Kozhikode. The Europeans called it Calicut. Vasco's journey was funded by Portugal's king on the orders of the Pope in Rome. The mission was to colonize Indian territory, control its resources, torture its people and impose Catholicism. In an act of cowardice and lack of dignity, the ruler of the Samudri kingdom in Kozhikode welcomed Vasco with open arms. In the months, years and decades that followed, Vasco and his Portuguese successors captured the Malabar civilization and turned its people into targets of persecution and murder. Just like the pilgrim ship incident, another episode stands out. On 27th October 1502, Vasco da Gama captured 50 Malabari sailors. He got his men to chop all 50 captured Indians into pieces. Vasco then put the body parts onto a boat and sent it to the Samudri king. He planted on the boat a written message for the king. Vasco wrote, "Here is a small gift. You can cook curry out of these body parts and eat it." There are many other things that Vasco did on Indian soil for which he should have been hanged. Instead, he was made Viceroy of Portuguese occupied India. Back home in Portugal, he was appointed Count of Vidigueira and he hung around with aristocrats. On orders from the Pope and the Portuguese king, Vasco asked his men to perpetually harass Indians who practiced Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism and other religions. He had orders from the European Catholic Church to carry out forced conversions. In a very dark way, Vasco brought India's Hindus and Muslims together by targeting them both. He also burned down many Indian villages. His men had this horrible practice. They not only killed the Indians who disliked colonialism, they also chopped their heads and hung them at the doors as a warning sign for others. Vasco da Gama died in Kochi from an illness on 24th December 1524 at the age of 64. He was buried in St. Francis Church in Fort Kochi. 14 years later, his remains were taken to Portugal, where he is remembered as a heroic explorer and founder of the Portuguese Empire in India. It is understandable for Europe to celebrate the colonizer. That's what they have done for centuries. Making legends and statues of crooks, thieves, pirates, racists, murderers, rapists and dacoits. But why should India have a city named after this mass murderer? And also, why in Goa? The question of why Goa is important here. That's because of something called the Goa Inquisition. It is a filthy chapter of Portuguese colonization of Malabar India. Goa was invaded by Portuguese pirates in 1510. It happened under Vasco da Gama's successor, Afonso de Albuquerque. This invader Albuquerque was an equally dangerous guy, if not worse than Vasco. His men took control of Goa from the hands of the local Adil Shahi kingdom. After that, he set up Goa for the Inquisition that came after he left the scene. So what's this Inquisition that the people of Goa suffered? It was basically a dirty project approved by the Pope and the King of Portugal. It was a project to unleash religious terror across Goa. The mission was to wipe out all religions from Goa and establish Catholic Christianity. The wipeout involved force and brutality never seen before. Now many people don't know that it was Francis Xavier who advised the Portuguese king to impose a witch hunt in India in the name of Inquisition. Francis Xavier was a Spanish missionary who also worked for the Portuguese Empire. Today he is celebrated in the Western world as a saint. But he was the guy who got the Goa Inquisition started. If you closely look at what happened during the Goa Inquisition, you will know why it is shameful for India to dedicate a city to Vasco. The Inquisition in Goa went on from 1560 to 1812. Now during this period, the Portuguese men killed 57 Indians for trying to defy the religious witch hunt. All local religions were branded as witchcraft and declared illegal. Portuguese invaders also banned Konkani and Sanskrit languages. More than 16,000 local people were charged for protesting against the Inquisition. When 64 protesting Indians died in jail in Goa, their bodies were dragged out in the open and burnt in full public glare. Strange and scary laws were brought in. If a Hindu man died, his children were forcefully captured by Portuguese men. Hindu marriages and rituals were declared illegal. A new tax called Zendi was imposed on Indians who chose not to follow Catholicism. It was imposed in Goa, Daman and Diu. At least 1,000 temples were vandalized or burned down by Portuguese men. Many worshippers died inside the temples when they were attacked. Temples were mostly taken down in Bardes and Salsette. It also happened on Divar Island. The Inquisition was so terrifying that out of Goa's population of 250,000, hardly 20,000 Indians protested and defied it. The majority surrendered to the demand and converted to Catholicism. Once the Inquisition was called off in 1812, the Portuguese cleverly tore up all the evidence into pieces. As a result, due to lack of proof, no one today knows precisely how many people were tortured and killed during the Inquisition. And we don't have any paperwork evidence of orders that came from the Pope and the King of Portugal. Now try to visualize this. An Indian man sails to Portugal. He and his men colonize the country. They burn down cities and towns, kill the men, rape the women, torture the children, ban local religions, colonize the place, and then one fine day they leave the place. What will the Portuguese people and the Portuguese government do? Will they honor this hypothetical Indian colonizer by naming an entire city after him and a government-run railway station and prominent landmarks? They will be out of their mind to do that, isn't it? But that's precisely what we have done in India. Vasco da Gama's notorious acts are well known to most Indians, including policymakers. Some critics believe Vasco and his successors together were responsible for killing a few lakh Indians in the Malabar region. And how have we Indians responded to that? We dedicated a city to him. You can say that it is understandable if a railway station and a clock tower are named after him. All over India, many streets and landmarks are named after British and French colonial invaders. But here we have an entire city named after Vasco da Gama, the man who launched Western imperialism in India. Why don't school books in India say the whole truth? Why do so many Indian historians respect Vasco da Gama as a brave explorer? Do we Indians really have a sense of self-respect? Are we blinded by the colonial hangover? When you come to Goa, do visit Vasco da Gama, look around and ask yourself these questions. Thanks for watching. Keep an eye on Empire Diaries for more such ground reports. Stay tuned, stay informed.